Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Davis, and you are watching Season 3 of Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsors, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant code calculator to let you get as many quotes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now, you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed so many successful Kickstarter campaigns, a bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now, listeners of this show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on their first order. So that is mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. Also, I have a BCW supplies code. Use popout.com to get 10% off your entire order. Bags, boards, long boxes, you name it, BCW supplies has it. And I know bags and boards are expensive. Inflation is hitting. And I think the last time I checked on BCW supplies, it was like 14 bucks for some bags. I think it was like 16 bucks for boards. So save yourself some money. It's an affiliate link. So use that code. And then on top of that, I have my Kickstarter, which is fully funded. We are at 101%. So feel free to check that out. And so without further ado, I have with me returning comic guest, Preston Poulter. So welcome back.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, boy, it has been a very crazy January, and let's start with what I'm here to talk about, which is my Kickstarter. So here I'm going to share my screen.
You have 9 days. You have 9 days. The naughty
Yeah.
version is sold out, and I think you have 26
Exactly.
physical copies left to sell.
Yeah, and one of the things is like 3 different people have indicated to me in one way or another, like, you know, it's like that Chappelle meme. You got any more of the naughty covers? Like, Preston, dude, I missed out. If you got one, if you just slide one out of the back of a truck or something, it's $40. You know, like, I'm like, no, you know, like, there.
So let's talk about this because
Okay.
it's House of the Golden Princess.
Yes.
And obviously, this is a very, very limited run, at least for the first round of this book.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Yes.
what other intentions you have with the book, but you do things slightly different. But what is the basic premise? Because anybody can get this digitally. It's unlimited digital.
Yeah.
So if you just want to read it, you could get it for $5 digitally. But we're talking about the physical stuff. So what is the basic premise of the comic?
All right, so Palace of the Golden Princess explores and harkens back to a 1983 TSR module. So, you know, the original first edition D&D back when there was basic D&D and AD&D and that whole time. And this was a module for basic D&D. So the marketing idea at the time was this was intended for like 10 to 14. Because the thinking in the early TSR days, and it's weird because the real reason for the split between those two games was that Gary Gygax kind of wanted to essentially kind of move Dave Arneson out of the who owns what IP. So Dave Arneson owned Dungeons and Dragons, but Gary now I've made Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is so, you know, and that whole legacy of thing. But at the time there were 2 games. And the logic at TSR anyway was, okay, we'll market TSR Basic to the lower audience, you know, the younger audience, I should say. And so this model came out in 1983, and it was immediately pulled from shelves. TSR printed it, they shipped it, and then they ordered it be destroyed and recalled. So and you know, I actually talked to somebody who worked at TSR at the time, because now I'm doing these conventions for like old geezers where they talk about old D&D. So I talked to somebody who was a freelancer there at the time. And he was like, yeah, I went down to the warehouse and grabbed 7. You know, they were like, yeah, we're destroying it. You know, so I'm like, oh, okay, well, hold on, let me get some. And he's like, in hindsight, I wish I'd gotten more, because, you know, now those modules are very expensive. Like they sell on eBay for like $6,000. Because they're really rare. So it was pulled for its racy sexual content, and this was like the first module that was written by a woman. And if you go and read it, I mean, but particularly by modern standards, it's pretty tame. But TSR was thinking, this is going to kids. You know, this is supposedly we're supposed to market this to 10 to 14-year-olds, and we're already under the whole satanic panic thing. So they killed it, and that was called Palace of the Silver Princess. And they basically fired Gene Wells, and they brought in someone else to rewrite the module, and they made it into a much more straightforward module. And that's a module that you can find on eBay way cheaper. So that's the history, and I wanted to do a tribute to kind of the original 1983, kind of racy sexual fantasy elements that that Gene Wells wrote in her original thing, because I have a copy of the original Palace of the Silver Princess, and as my co-writer, the guy who's writing all my modules, said, you can tell after reading it that Gene Wells was kind of kinky. I'm like, yeah, you could. I mean, she's definitely putting some stuff in there. So, in the spirit of being sex positive, I present Palace of the Golden Princess. I'm sharing the campaign page with you. So this is this is the nice cover right here. This is Queen Aurica, and she is on a rug, and this is the symbol of state behind her. And as we go down here to the first two pages, I put 12 pages up on Kickstarter. So first of all, what do you think of the artwork?
So obviously the artwork is very, very stunning, but it's also very graphic, especially like the second page. It's all bloodied up. And
Yeah.
I'm just going to apologize ahead of time for
Okay.
everybody who's listening to this in legitimately 6 to 9 months in podcast form. I'm sorry. You can't see it. So you're going to have to just live with this. But anyway, continue.
So, it's as I say, this is fantasy, and fantasy, you get a lot of skin, as I put in my video, and this is what the queen looks like, and her just walking around where, I feel this is very true to the original Gene Wells interpretation of what if you had like a sexy female-led adventuring world, and I've never really seen that in fantasy, so. What can I say? I know it's some people's fantasy. So I set a comic book there, and this was the cover here, Queen Aurica, as she is being desecrated in the service of her patron demoness succubus, and apparently loving it. And this sold out, like the fully nude where we do away with the dress, sold out within like under 24 hours, and I only issued 100 naughty and 100 nice, and yeah, we only have like 25 left of the nice covers. So I think this campaign will be the first where I sell out all 200 of both naughty and nice. So this is quite a bit of demand for issue 1, and you can also pick up a PDF for $5 on the campaign, as well as some of my back issues.
Let's talk a little bit about this before we get into the story, because you've done a bunch of different business models.
Yes.
Where with certain books prior, and we spoke about this, you've done just 100, almost make 100, and then that's sort of a pre-campaign.
Yes.
And some nice stuff in
and
there.
That's what this is, by the way. This is a pre-campaign.
And so this is where I wanted to get at, because some people just don't know what's going on, because you do things differently, where you have a pre-campaign, and then that gives you an idea of how much you're going to sell, how much you need to print, as well as it also helps the secondary campaign, and the main campaign, where there's some more covers and things of that nature, and obviously some more backlog stuff. And it also helps because you're printing the same book, it's just slightly structured different, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
And so I wanted to clarify, because people don't know, and people are hearing about this and they just dropped and they're saying, oh my God, I missed out. What am I going to do?
Right.
Well, I want to make sure everybody's calmed down for 5 seconds. And so, but even going further into that, and obviously we spoke about that whole business model, which I actually think is really, really smart in a lot of ways. I think people should copy that business strategy, especially if you do have naughtier covers, because it gives a sense and it also separates it. And, in today's culture, unfortunately, sometimes separation is a good thing for branding. But even going into the story, what was this like really building on an interpretation of that old rare, D&D type module setting? Because it is a huge, world, and it's big, and D&D has made a huge comeback in the last 5 years.
Right. I mean, really, it's made a big comeback since the 90s. Since 2000. In the 90s, D&D was kind of on the way out. It was viewed as passe. There are all these hot new games. Vampire the Masquerade, stuff like that. Magic the Gathering was coming, but then TSR essentially lost to Wizards of the Coast, and once Wizards of the Coast got it, they made a very bold decision, and that's to license the game out for anyone to publish under. Which brings me to the next thing I'm going to pair this comic book with, which is I have a entire module for the 5th edition, world's most popular role-playing system. That's how I have to say it. But you will be able to get a 5e module that's written for like this old school 1980s TSR style of adventure, and a comic book and miniatures and like a campaign guide and some of the guides of the evil deities. And I'll bundle this all together. And if you just want the comic book, okay, then the retail cover of the comic book will be $10 delivered. So $10 free delivery. But you're probably also going to want the D&D module, and the campaign module and the miniatures. So there's coming the next category I'm going to be doing for Palace is not going to be comic books. It's going to be in role-playing games on Kickstarter.
So let's even talk about that, because this is super interesting, where I know people who are doing that as well. J.S. Moore is doing that, where he has a game coming out with a comic he's doing. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that with role-playing games and things pairing together. Obviously, I know Santine Phoenix, she just released a book, I think, and that's coming in the next few weeks, hopefully, to the States. And so what is that like to really say, hey, I'm now crossing multiple genres of mediums, because comic books and D&D and anime and even professional wrestling, they're all cousins to some degree. Right. And so what is that like to say, hey, I want to expand as a business? And I also know that I don't play D&D, but getting me into D&D through comic books is a much easier position than doing it through football, for instance.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of crossover. I did last year's North Texas RPG Con, which is where I got to talk to some of those TSR old timers. And I'm going to do that next year. And I did Long Con. I do conventions. I'd like to get into Gary Con. These are conventions that are just old school TSR fantasy role playing, or 5th edition, that kind of stuff. That's what these conventions specialize in. And right now, I don't have any products that directly service that market. I don't have any D&D games. I don't sell for Wizards. I don't sell for anyone else. I don't sell for any of these old, OSR clones. I have no role-playing products, but I show up at these RPG cons and I sell a whole bunch of prints and a whole bunch of comics, and they buy my Frazetta books. I mean, the most sales I ever made was at a non-comic convention. It was at one of these role-playing game conventions. So I was thinking, wow, if I'm setting record in sales and the merch isn't even in the right category technically, imagine how much I can sell if the merch is in the right category. So that's when I started going, okay, I want an officially licensed module for 5e, and that's going to be coming out soon.
Yeah, and then obviously the comic is going on, and we have the Queen, and I'm probably gonna get her name wrong, even though you said it.
Arica. It's like Erica, but it's more like gothic.
I feared you should correct me first and foremost.
Okay, you got
Arica, and obviously she is very interesting. She sort of is controlling men to some degree. It's
absolutely, yes.
Matriarchal society.
Yes.
It's not so matriarchal once you dive into it. But what was this like, even building out her character? Because she is embracing the demon-esque side of things, and she's obviously covered in blood, and she knows how to manipulate men, and
Right.
possibly women as well to some degree. And so, what was this like? Because it's so
Well,
interesting. And she's kind of a bitch a little bit.
she absolutely is. I mean, look, I spent so much time, role playing. I played a lot of Pathfinder when I was out in Los Angeles, and I played some local D&D games. And very popular even at the OSR cons. 5e remains pretty popular. So it's a big popular market, and that's cool. And I like bringing products to it. So, what was your exact question again? I forget.
So, what was it like really bringing her out and bringing her as a character, our
Oh,
character?
okay. So yeah, I've role played a lot, and one of my inspirations was really Pathfinder, because they have a an evil region called Cheliax, a bunch of devil worshippers with like a queen at the head of it. And I role played a number of campaigns set in that. And so, I've had to think about and interact with characters in this kind of, femdom, devil slash demon worshipping setting. That embraces evil in order to bring a certain order to society that favors a certain people, and outwardly, hooray women and all that good jazz. And that kind of came through in my thing. So yes, Queen Arica is a manipulator, but if you worship evil, then of course you're going to be. And and again, I think this is she's embracing the feminine interpretation of evil, as opposed to being drenched carrying a sword and like severed heads the way we would if you were a man embracing evil. This is a woman embracing evil, and so she is embracing the more sexual side of her personality and her ability to leverage that in order to get what she wants.
Yeah, and she's doing a lot of stuff, and it's getting very interesting. And then she also has a foil,
Hmm.
and her foil, I think, is Thora. I want to say.
Yeah.
And Thora is sort of the opposite in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
And Thora is very much a fighter down on the ground level, is competing with the men in a lot of ways. And Thora has some magical armor, or
Yep.
possessed armor.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because Thora has, obviously respect of sort of being a governance and a constable level type things.
Yes.
At the same time, Thora is also not exactly happy, and Arica wants to put Thora in her place. And it's very
Yeah.
interesting what's going on here, because we don't find out too much in the issue, at least in these 12 pages, but there's obviously something going on between these two, that they either don't like each other or one of them views the other as a threat,
Right.
and some shit's about to go down.
Exactly. So did you like the first 12 pages?
I want to know what happens. Like
Well,
that's
that's
really what,
the goal, right?
because we're going to talk about Kickstarter structure, because
Sure.
that's what I'm personally interested in as well. But that's not in a little bit. But what was this like really building out Thora? Because obviously we don't find out much about Arica beyond
Mhm.
the fact that she knows how to manipulate people, and that she's got something that's allowing her to do it and is controlling her country
Right.
essentially. But we know a lot more about Thora, and we also find out that the magic that Thora has and others that might have
Right.
is not working, and what just happened. And so that's kind of where the story goes. And it's not a spoiler because it's in the first 12 pages.
Exactly. That's right there. So, one, I really had to think about, all right, just embracing the fantasy, which we've seen a number of times. What if women were running things? And well, historically there's a reason why we don't often see women running things, and that's because men hit harder. So when it comes to a competition for resources and physical strength is kind of important, well, then men tend to run kingdoms because we were taking it. What are we going to do? Like fantasy and magic, now we can say, oh well, women were able to ally themselves, or this, we have to break it down and go, this group of women over here are ruling in this power structure supported by these demonic spiritual patrons who feed them magic in order to rule over the men. And what would that look like? And so, Thor plays a governess, which is like, the local secret thought police dressed all sexy, because the name is fantasy, right? So of course she's going to dress all sexy to be the local thought police, and of course her title is governess. But like, what magic would they embrace to put them on par, if not superior, to men? And so, you know, she's shrinking down here. The armor make her 30% bigger, and that's actually a spell. You know, it's in fantasy, you know, like in large print, to make yourself bigger and stronger. And so she's larger and she's more muscular. You know, the magic is influencing her, and this allows her to, you know, compete essentially with Edmund, as we see in the opening few pages that are there on, you know, issue 12. You know, she beat many but lost in the joust finals for Queen Araka's hand that evening, that kind of thing. And the magic, as you put it, stops working. So if the whole society was propped up by, you know, this that was given by the worship of this demonic patron, and something that's been shut off, and now what's going to happen? So that's one of the things we explore here in issue 1.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and that's kind of where I think the 12 pages ends. And well, we're about to find out what happens in the remainder of the first issue, and then so on and so forth. And
Right.
I don't want to push too hard here, because I want people to actually go buy the book and actually go read it, at least the first run, and get you further funded, because you're already funded. I think you're like 250% funded. I want to say.
Yeah, I had a 20. I mean, this thing just, it was wholesome. You know, I did an offer where I was like, okay, so again, I want the big campaign to be the one that's paired with the role playing stuff. I want it to be, here's a comic, and here's a module, and here's a campaign world, and here's a miniature. You know, like, and why don't you bundle all these things together? Hey, would you pay 100 for that? Or how, you know, and oh, these are exclusive and limited edition and all that jazz, you know? So I feel like there's a lot of value here that people would step up and throw money at. So that's my goal, is to have a big campaign launch with the role-playing stuff. So I said, okay, I'm just going to offer as a pre-edition, just for my super secret comic fans, 100 naughty and nice covers. And the nice cover, which is the only cover we got left, as you mentioned, is like 25 copies left, is, you know, Queen Araka in the dress, $20 gets it delivered. For the nude cover, it was $30 gets it delivered. And like I said, I'm about to sell out. So this thing is going crazy. I have very high hopes for the campaign that's going to follow this one, where I'm going to launch all the role-playing merch.
And so even to talk further about this, because obviously, you know, there's a bigger picture here with this.
Mm-hmm.
And the soft ones, as I was stating, gives you a real idea of what people want. It also helps to make sure that you have, you know, pre-order funds, and you know exactly what you need to print for that secondary launch and the bigger launch. And then also the understanding is that, you know, obviously there's people like me and people who say, look, I just want the thing now, or I'm a comic fan and I just want to make sure I get it. And it's a whole collector's thing versus, you know, more mainstream thing. And so it's very interesting. I also like the fact that it is super limited. You know, we were sort of, you know, talking a little bit before, I don't remember if it was on air or not, that people are asking, hey, can you get me a naughty cover? And you're like, you really can't, because you're all sold out. And what is that like? Because one of the things is that probably next year or 2 years, I'm going to be producing my own variants for my eBay store. Awesome. And one of the things I want to do immediately, even if I take a loss on the first one, is sell out of the book. Because the problem is that when you have people saying, hey, man, do you have any of these covers left over? That's a good problem to have. Because that means the next time you do a variant, someone's going to jump on it a lot quicker. Because they're going to be scared that it's going to sell out. And so what is that like for you, knowing that one of your things already sold out?
Mm-hmm. Look, it gives me a lot of confidence. It lets me know where to allocate my resources. Because last time I was here, I was promoting another campaign I was doing called Iron, you know. And look, if you go, you remarked at the time, it has great artwork. But the response, I think that campaign ended, and I was offering the same thing I'm offering here. You know, 100 of each, one naughty, one nice, and that Lords of Iron ended around 3,700. This one obviously is going far better than 3,700. So now, me as a comic creator, it lets me know, okay, what do audience want to see? They want to see fantasy. They don't want to let me do more fantasy.
So let's even talk about that, because obviously I just funded on Kickstarter about a week ago, and I'm a podcast, and obviously I'm very happy because it gets me through, a good chunk of the remainder of season 3 and a good chunk of season 4 moving forward. So I'm in a good position just to keep me afloat. But it's the idea that I also understand, just on a data point, where people are interested in rewards, where people and what rewards fell short. And if I ever do this again, I'm going to know what to hit, what not to hit. And so, what is that like for you now, knowing, hey, people want this, and it gives you data? Because sometimes in comics, ideas don't connect, and it's
Right.
not because the book's bad. It's just because maybe somebody doesn't like that type of story.
Yeah. I mean, look, I shuffle around, like, okay, I delay, okay, Lords of Iron issue 2, let's save that for next year. Meanwhile, I'm printing up a whole bunch of Lords of Iron issue 1, and I'll be, it's now going to be my giveaway book. When I go to conventions, I'll be giving that one away and telling people, oh, sign up for issue 2. I'm going to build interest in the Lords of Iron story more organically, whereas Palace is growing more explosively. I don't have to hand sell that one. People look at it and they go, want, here's cash, take it. So, that allows me to go, okay, all my next offerings need to be more this. And I'm happy about that.
Because I'm now going through, and obviously I'm starting to do it, and I've downloaded all my YouTube data, and I've downloaded a lot of Facebook data, where I'm actually looking at what works on YouTube and what
Right.
doesn't work on Facebook. So one of the things that I've learned, because I'm now looking for advertisers, is that voice actors slay on YouTube. All those interviews with voice actors, they have like 6 to 1,000 views or more. And my entire comic stuff doesn't do well on YouTube, but it does well on Facebook. And so now I'm understanding a bunch of data. So it's very important for me that I'm saying, where do I want to focus my attention to, and what platforms do I promote on? And so it's super interesting for me as an individual to go through that. And I'd imagine that now, the way this is going, you're getting data points. And I think it's very important that it's not the book's fault. It's just that the market determines everything and what everything is worth. And doesn't mean Lord of Irons. I like Lord of Irons, more personally, as it's more my genre of a story than, the Golden Palace book is. But at the same time, a lot of people like fantasy, and that's all right because everybody's different. You're muted.
Well, in part, we just went through quarantine, and there was a big explosion of role playing games because people didn't have anything to do. So they'd get online and they'd start playing role playing games. So all the role playing games gained a lot of interest. And all the merch that's around those role playing games is gaining a lot of interest. Look, my advice to anybody these days: fantasy, get in it. It's good. So
I may or may not be writing a fantasy
yeah.
component to a book, but I can't. I
Yeah,
can't
look,
help you
you,
talk
you you
about
heard you heard it here first. If you're not writing fantasy, you're cheating yourself. There.
I have to get my medieval on, for lack of a better word, and it's going to be
Okay.
a very, very fun project. But
Yeah.
I can't talk too much about it at the moment, because the more I talk, the more I'm going to want to just tell everybody what it is.
All right, fair enough.
But I got hired, so I can't actually say anything. But having said that, obviously I'm in the middle of my first campaign. I got 7 days left. I am at $764,
Awesome.
and I am beyond
By the
happy.
way, do you want to see how some of my little disciples have done?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I have a YouTube channel, Pocket Jacks Comics, where I have a very boring Wednesday night stream where I look at, I look at writing. People can bring in scripts and whatnot, and this has kind of become a natural mentorship that leads into, people launching their own projects. So this is John Lamont. He's been bringing his scripts in now for coming up on 2 years. He launched yesterday. Look at that. Second comic ever, $2,600.
That's a good start.
Not bad, right?
I mean, I'm a podcast, so
Yes.
it's a little bit
Okay.
different when you're funding a podcast. There's
Yes.
been a lot of flack towards me in
Yeah.
the community where there's been about like 9 to 10 people who have been somewhat beating me up on a lot of things. But
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because people don't want to pay for live reads. They don't find value yet.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and I believe it is the essence of crowdfunding that, well, it is. Sometimes you're not just buying a product, you're
Yeah.
helping a book get made, and I think it's a
Exactly.
misconception. And I don't see how a podcast is any different, where it's kind of like, if it's not free to run my show, guys. So
Right.
just saying. But having said that, obviously, I'm very excited. So I'm curious about structure and even just Kickstarter in general with you, because you do very well with Kickstarter, both on a small level campaign like the Make 100s, and then
Right.
also the bigger stuff that you're doing. And not every campaign does. Some campaigns do better than others, but what is that like for you, knowing that you've been doing a lot of these, and I think you did like 26 of them, I want to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, this is my job, and I love my job. I love what I do, and I'm happy to do it. And other people come along, and I show them how to do it, and it's working for them too. So, and while we're at it, let's see. Where's Cygnus Imperium? Here's another. Danny comes in. He's my editor, and he also comes on my writer's stream, and he's about to hit his goal. And Cygnus Imperium is awesome. Now, and Danny, I know, is very aware of what John Lamont's campaign is doing. And you notice the Danny's covers look a little different than the covers John is offering.
Mm-hmm.
And like, look, it's just one of those data points. Okay, these covers right here, and this number right here, right? Okay, can you picture that?
Yeah.
Okay, and now let's take a look. These covers right here.
I mean, I'm well aware. I
Yeah.
noticed the difference immediately.
And then this number right here. Right?
Let's talk about that, because obviously I'm a variant guy,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be launching, not my next project, where I'm going to be entering the comic game at some point,
Right.
maybe in April, maybe June, depending on my finances. And I
Okay.
want to get through this one first. I want to make sure that everybody who's actually backed my first one gets taken care of and scheduled, and all those rewards go out, because that's just how I operate. Where if
Right.
people trusted me enough, I would like to fulfill, so that they're like, oh, he actually fulfills, and he doesn't just stiff us and run away with the money.
Right.
But one of the things is that I want to be very variant heavy, because I understand that that's what I am. I am a variant collector. I am a comic book investing guy, where I buy comics. I am looking for my books to go up in value as alternative investing. I speak about that topic extensively, and I'm on a lot of shows now. January, I've been on like 10 shows talking about it, and that's how it's going to be for the next 12 months in my life. But what is that like, and how do you view that? Because I think variants do sell books, and I think it also hits a different niche, where some people
Sure.
want to read comics on Kickstarter, and some people say, look, I just want really cool limited edition variants.
Right.
And also it's the type of variant, where it's that bad girl variant or nude variants, or super exclusive variants. And so that's a whole different ball game, where it's kind of like that 1 in 50 ratio variant at your comic book store now is
Yeah.
sort of the model. Because I'm a variant collector on Kickstarter. A lot of Kickstarter
Well,
books
now
buying straight for the art.
hold on. You said something, and I want to see if I can correct. Is I guess what I want to say. When you talk about 1 in 50 at your local comic book store,
So
that's okay.
I'll clarify.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm not talking 1 out of 50. I'm talking a 1 in 50 variant ratio. So for every regular 50 covers ordered, you get one of the 50.
Right. So those I don't call variants, because I feel that they are in a different family than what I'm offering on Kickstarter. If you go to John Lamont's campaign for Spirit of the Dragon, right, you can get this cover for this price or that cover for that price, and they're all limited edition. Some artists are more high profile than others. He's got some R.B. White stuff, Keith Garvey. I know those have been real popular. my campaign for Queen Arica, that's Whiskey Paint, which is an artist that I've been turning everybody onto, and John Lamont's got a Whiskey Paint cover, you know, that, so they're all at different price points, and you can pick which one you want, right? So that's, in my opinion, that's a variant cover. The idea that I want this super rare edition of Spider-Man, so I have to order 50 regular covers of Spider-Man to get the one super rare one, I call that an incentive cover, meaning it's incentivizing you to buy a whole bunch of other stuff, right? For the variant covers I'm offering, for the variant covers John's offering, that's the transaction. Here's the book, one of 100, you want it, you got it, right? You don't have to buy a whole bunch of other things in order to get it. So to me, variants are different than incentives, because people go and they say variant covers are ruining the business, and I think what they mean to say are incentive covers are ruining the business, because that
it's complicated because there's two things with it. So a
okay.
store gets 1,000 copies, so they do a variant cover, and
Right.
it's a store exclusive, that's 1,000.
Right.
And you look at like Detective Comics 1,000. There were way too many variants because Midtown Comics. Then you had a comic store in California, one in Illinois, one in Arizona. All of those had 1,000 or 1,500 copies, and that is a variant. And so when people say there's a whole discussion about incentives, variants, because if you have a limited number, like a Clayton Crane variant book, you know, so certain stores have their own exclusive variants. And then when a book has 50 variants from 50 different stores, that's an issue. And then it also has incentives, and then it has like secret retailer stuff as well. And then it gets all complicated because now you have a lot of covers. And so one of the things that happens is that obviously I teach comic book investing. So I view an incentive as just another variant because it's the easiest way to explain it. Because it also, when you start actually looking at the print run, it says, oh, okay, there's only so many of these books out there. Now, technically speaking, it is an incentive.
Well, the practice that people didn't like is that stores would order a whole bunch of issues of cover A in order to get super rare cover, and then they wouldn't be able to sell all the cover A's they would order. And then, you know, they'd go in the dollar bin, or they'd get returned back to the manufacturer. And meanwhile, they'd be taking up a lot of shelf space. And something it also seems like maybe it's starting to kind of approach a predatory pricing model where Marvel and DC are kind of taking up all the shelf space by saying, buy more from us and you'll get more rare stuff that you're not going to get from Image and whatnot. So incentives, I think, have kind of a bad practice and a bad motive behind them, quite frankly. But this is not my fight. I am not a local comic book store comic person, you know. I don't really cater to that much about that market. I mean, you know, I go to my local comic book store, I get stuff, and sometimes I talk with people and see if they want to distribute my stuff from the local comic book store. And you can get White Lily at your local comic book store, you know, depending on availability. They sold up pretty fast because not a whole lot got printed. But anyway, I don't waste a lot of time with local. I don't like incentive covers, and but that's got nothing to do with what I'm offering on my campaign, you know. So.
No, I mean, I view that it's just for me, you know, it's all the same because it's how I teach it and it's the simplest way. And I just view it all as variants. But obviously, there's incentive, there's like secret, there's alternatives, there's a bunch of stuff. And that module in the class I'm building is like an hour and a half to 2 hours. There are 38 plus different type of variants, incentives, and a variety of other things that are out there. And it is disturbing when you go through that history. And people are going to be like, what the fuck are you teaching me? And why? Because believe me, there's like a Mark Jeweler variant. And most people have never seen a Mark Jeweler variant. But the right Mark Jeweler variant could legitimately mean the difference between a book being worth $5 and being worth $30,000.
Right.
The right book that has it. It's a crazy world that I live in that field. But I digress because that's not what this show is about. You know, it's way beyond anybody's pay grade as far as I'm concerned. But obviously, you have a lot of stuff going on
Yeah.
with this. And obviously, you're planning most likely when you launch the bigger campaign to have a bunch of other variants. I'm pretty sure of with this entire book that's coming out. But this is a soft launch, and
Yeah.
so I'm curious, when is that bigger launch coming?
Well, the campaign I'm going to do immediately after this one is going to be Lords of Iron, because again, we did the soft launch for Lords of Iron back in November, and so now I'm here to get that book out, and that's going to be in February, and I'm going to try and get that fulfilled as soon as I can to then do the big launch for Palace in March. So that's my goal.
So we're not that far off, everybody.
No.
In case you
Yeah.
missed it, we're not that far off, or our funds are tight. You're going to be able to get, Palace pretty much in March, and then you distribute pretty quickly
I
within
do.
6 to 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And so now I definitely want to back out of this, and obviously I want people to go check it out. And then if you can't get it because it sells out, and it looks like it's going to, in the next few days sell out, obviously you can just pick it up in March with a variety of other things. And I'm pretty sure that they could pick up any tier they want pretty much in March, whether they want, just as
Absolutely. Yeah.
one book or
And the thing for me, like when I go to do the big campaign in March, people should have more confidence because this is a book I've already distributed once, and people have already hopefully said they like once, so I'm kind of proving the value by the prior customer base and the prior relationships, and it's building trust and reputation, and that's what I feel like I'm doing. So
yeah. And now I do want to back out because obviously I do want to
sounds
speak
good.
about something that happened in the last
Oh, okay.
interview.
Okay,
And
sure.
we're going to get slightly controversial, but
Okay. All right.
obviously I do want to talk about Larry Holder.
Okay.
And obviously you sort of had a position in that book, and you helped bring that
Yes.
book to fruition. I think you had a very successful Kickstarter with that.
Yeah.
And we were speaking slightly off air on a certain topic,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting because you're sort of speaking about how recycling content and bringing people's content and buying somebody's IP to some degree, and then bringing it to the core market.
Right.
And so, what is the entire story behind that?
All
Because
right. So yeah, as I mentioned off air, there's a book I read that I recommend people read because it's a good book. It's about one of the history of the entertainment business, and it's how I made 50 movies in Hollywood and never lost a dime by Roger Corman, right? Who's known as the king of B movies. But one, that's pretty impressive to make 50 movies and never lose money on them. And oh, what's this? But the way Harvey Korman approached it became kind of industry standard, which is look to see where there's a market, look to see where you can have really good value, a really good return on your production dollar that people would be willing to pay for the end result on, and that's where you should invest. So one of the things Harvey Korman would do is he would buy people's essentially abandoned movies where this would-be movie maker raised some money from friends, got some investors, shot some stuff, but they didn't end up with a movie that they felt like they could release. So they blew through all the money and they just have this footage, and then Harvey Korman would come in and look at it, buy it from them, and then make a. And one of the things that Harvey Korman talks about in the book is he's like, even if the original film is disjointed, if I can, all I have to do is add in a narrator to have it make sense. So, just add in the crypt keeper or whatever and go, now I'm going to tell you a story. So the narrator could add some story to make sense. And now you can salvage a film out of what was previously just, a bunch of disconnected scenes. And now you have a movie you can sell, and how much money did that really cost? The idea that there's value in these abandoned projects, seemed like that would also apply to comic books, because comic books has abandoned projects. Particularly if you're around the Larry Higgins circle, there's a bunch of abandoned projects around, over in there. A bunch of people got money for a comic book that haven't been able to deliver, and Larry Holder was one of them. And, again, going back to Roger Corman, I'm like, okay, tell you what, I'll have the money to bring this to the market so the consumers are winning, right? Because the consumers, I fulfilled Larry Holder's Indiegogo campaign. And of course, because these are, this was Larry Holder's, a lot of Larry Higgins backers from 2019, and they all hate me now. So I'm sure it was a bittersweet moment getting a book they thought they were never going to get from a guy that they hated. They were like, they didn't know whether to be happy or sad. So, like Larry Holder would get these schizophrenic emails of, I got my book and I'm pissed off. Like, okay, awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because
Okay.
obviously, Larry's a friend. Larry Higgins is
Yeah.
a friend of mine, and
Okay.
I was just on his show, so I don't want to beat him up too much.
Okay.
And so, but in reality, and something that I think is very important, and the lesson to take away from all this is that a lot of projects don't make it on Kickstarter. They don't make it on Indiegogo, and it could be partially the idea that the project sort of sucks, to be very nice about it. The project needs some refining, needs a new coat of wax on it, or needs to be polished up, or maybe the person who is doing the project isn't the right person, or they need some assistance. And so obviously if somebody then comes in and says, hey, look, let me take this over and let me buy it straight out, it's kind of like buying a little business to some degree.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and that's what I think people don't understand, is that projects fail, but sometimes you need a new engine in the vehicle, or a new person, and that's sort of what you did. And I think it's a good and bad thing to some degree, because if it works and it fixes the project, then if you buy the whole thing, you buy equity in it, or however you structure it, or you buy a royalty, well, that project then got brought into the market and then it gets distributed. And I think that's something that people need to understand, is that it's the only people who might have a hard time with it is everybody but the consumer. Because if the consumer gets a product, then it's a good thing.
Yes, exactly. So it's very pro-consumer, because these consumers who plunk money down for a crowdfund are now going to actually get their book. Now, of course, in the case of the Larry Higgins fans, they might get their book from someone they don't like, and now they might have a curses, but whatever. You paid for a book, you got a book, be happy.
Or even the idea, if the Kickstarter doesn't fund, and then it's on Kickstarter where it's all or nothing, and it doesn't fund, but the project is interesting.
And that's something else I'm doing. There's another guy who's on my writer stream, and he was working on his own. And look, I'll do that. Some people get fiercely independent. He was working on his own to crowdfund a book, and he didn't hit his goal. And now we're talking, and I'm like, okay, well, what do you got? Let me see your work. Okay, well, why don't we finish the book? Well, because I don't have the money. Well, here, I'll help you with the money. Finish the book, and then we'll come back and I'll crowdfund it, and I'll be able to bring in some cash that will allow me to pay myself back, get your book done. Now it's out there. Wouldn't you rather have part of something than all of nothing? I don't understand the argument.
So obviously I love private equity.
Yeah.
I'm big into stocks, and the way I view my stock position is, if I buy a company like Apple, I am buying a piece of that company. And I have, compared to other people and other institutions, very small piece, but having 0.00001% of something is better than having 0.0000 of something. So that's how I view it. And at some point, I don't have a problem buying equity in somebody's project. And because, especially if it's good, even if it's 10%, 20%, 30%, if that thing takes off and it's successful, and obviously in comics in particular, that content can always be reshot out. You could always print books. You could always put it into a graphic novel. It can always be recycled in some format. And so it's very interesting to me, because I think a lot of people don't understand this. And I think a lot of people in comics don't understand the business side of it. The way you make money in comics is not the same way you make money in podcasting. It's not the same way you make money in, selling comic books versus in producing a comic, And so if you own a piece of the IP, that's how you make real money in comics. And I think people are just upset because they don't know how to do that, or they don't have the capabilities to take that risk, or they don't know where to find ideas. And I mean, I guarantee you that if somebody goes on Kickstarter, if you look at all the unsuccessful campaigns, there are some gems in there, and that if you reach out, you could structure a deal and you could figure out how to do it.
Absolutely.
It's not that hard. I mean, it is hard. Let's not pretend here, but it's not that hard to find opportunity. I just think people are upset that you sort of found an opportunity.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't, but I don't know who I'm supposed to apologize to, you know?
No,
Yeah.
it's people are upset because I think people are saying, I don't know how to do this, or I didn't think of it. And, sometimes people like, I have a troll who's giving me a hard time with my podcast. And I think
Mhm.
he's upset because I figured out how to do something and then I got a lot of funding for me at least. And then I am funded. And I think he's upset because he's like, I can't do that, or I didn't think about doing it. And I've gotten a few messages from people like, yo, I love this concept. This is brilliant what you just did. What I essentially did, for lack of a better word, is that I basically said you can pay to have a guaranteed guest spot on my show, and it
Right.
is like having a upgraded ticket at a con because I get a lot of interview requests, and then you become a priority whenever you want to be on my show for
Mhm.
that interview or a second interview. And so somebody who doesn't pay, they don't have priority over the person who does.
Okay.
And for some people, that's worth it because they're like, I got 5 projects this year, and if that means I don't have to book you 5 times, or that if I have a last minute thing and you got to bump somebody, that's what it's going to look like. So that's how the theory is, or with my ads, where my ads are relatively cheap and they stay up forever. And then some people say, hey, I just want to throw you a bone. So some people understand the idea saying, look, I'm going to become a priority to you. And that's what you're buying because you're really buying access and time, is what my entire Kickstarter is. If we sum it down, and it's brilliant because time is money.
Yeah, I concur.
And I think people are upset with me, and a lot of people, because they didn't think of that and they don't understand that, when last year I got over 150 requests that I had to turn down just because there's not enough time to do everybody. So that's a good problem to have when you.
I'm very
when,
happy to be here.
no, I'm happy to have you. I still happen to like you. So
Thank you so much. All
don't blow it. Just don't blow
right.
it.
Okay.
I also like the fact that you've essentially done private equity in comics, and I'm
Yeah.
waiting for you to take your company public.
Well, and the other thing, going back to the variant covers, because again, I come out of movies. I come out, look, I'm studying Harvey Korman, talking about movies. If I want to go get an investor in a movie, right? Well, what am I going to offer them? I'm going to offer them, say, a piece of the return after distribution fees and all kinds of other stuff. So think about that. Okay, Andrew, I'm going to make a movie. Write me a check now. So for 5 or 10 grand, and here and now I'm going to hand you a slip of paper that says you've got equity in my movie, and here's your place in the LLC. And now we're going to go make the movie. I'm going to shoot the movie. The movie's going to get distributed. How long does that take? 18 months, couple of years, right? And then when it comes back time to, okay, now it's time to pay you, you're going to get an annual, 12K statement, and here's how much we decided to give you this year, and hooray, right? Okay, compare that experience for $5,000 or $10,000 versus the, hold on just a minute. Go ahead. So compare that experience for 5,000 or 10,000 versus instead investing in comic books, like you were talking about. And now imagine like investing in my comic book. Say you buy $5,000 or $10,000 worth of rare variant covers for me. Well, I'm still getting $5,000, right? So I'm still going to go make my stuff. But instead of getting a slip of paper that might be worth something 2 years from now, you're going to get a bunch of books that have defined rareness to them that you can flip on eBay wherever you want. And if you're pretty savvy about it, you should be able to make a profit, and they should appreciate over time. Because one of 100, 5 years from now, think how much it's going to be worth. So to me, it really simplifies the whole investing model. And now we don't have to talk about contracts and equity and annual, 12K statements and crap.
So there's a reason why I like playing in the entire comic world. But obviously I'm slowly entering where I am buying retail packages off Kickstarter, but I'm also being very, very selective, and I like to play with only 10 books,
Mhm.
just because I like having different inventory. where I don't want to go and spend more than like $120 on a Kickstarter for 10 to 15 books just because I want to have different books because different things do differently. And also, when I sell a book on eBay and you sell on eBay, I'm not looking for an investment per se because I'm buying at a 50 to 60% discount and I'm looking to sell it at retail. So if I buy a book for 10, I'm looking for 20, maybe 22 on it. So I'm looking to get rid of it in 3 to 4 months. I'm not looking to hold on to it for 5 years versus the other side of my eBay business where I have a 1 month, a 3 month, a 6 month, a year, a 3 year, and a 5 year, and then a 5+ year bucket. So that's the other side where I'm in both things. So, but I completely get that a 1 in 100 naturally has value. These
Particularly
books,
if it's like a hard artist, like that campaign I was showing you for Spirit of the Dragon. Keith Garvey, he's a he does a lot of stuff for Zenescope. If you have one, even if John Lamont never makes another comic book, that 1 of 100 Keith Garvey cover should still be worth something. So
I mean, Zenescope does Z-rated covers, and they sell them for $100. Now, the difference is that Zenescope is a well-established company. They're a company that's been around for 16, almost 17 years. So their books are going to fetch more than a New Kid on the Block's book. But if you have a 1 in 100 variant and it's your first Kickstarter, I mean, that's a $40 to $50 book easy. Maybe on a bad day it's $35. But, even still, it didn't cost $35 to produce that book. No. Or it shouldn't cost $35.
Exactly, yes.
If it costs you $35, unless you purposely made it because you're going to be in the game for the next 20 years and you're just using publicity, which is a different...
Your cost to produce a comic book should not be $35. If you're not happily making a profit with a $35 price tag on a freaking 24-page comic book, then you shouldn't be in this business.
I know exactly how much, if you with certain artists, it costs per down to the T per book because it's printing costs plus artist cost over the number of issues you have divided essentially. So if your entire thing was $1,500, it's $1,500 divided by your printing costs. If that included printing, and that's how much each book is your bottom number, and then you need to figure out your multiple on what you want to sell it for. And as that number goes up, the price drops downward. If you are printing 10,000 copies of a book, it is significantly cheaper than if you were printing 250 copies.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's a quick lesson. But again, I've never printed a book, so I'm not there yet. It's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, no, I think it's very interesting because I think what you're doing is fascinating. I think owning equity is a very different component, and obviously I own all my company right now, and I like owning all my company for a reason. And I actually at some point want to buy other people's podcasts up because I understand what that looks like, and I know exactly why I want to do it because there's real money to be made in intellectual property, and I think you're one of the only people who are doing that. Black Sands is sort of doing that, and they just sold some stuff on Shark Tank, but it's very interesting what you're doing in that sector, and I think you're smarter than a lot of people in that space.
I do my best. I haven't won Larry Higgins over, but oh well.
Hey! At some point, I'm gonna get you, him, a few other people, and we're gonna hash it out, and everybody's gonna be friends at the end. At some point,
I don't know about that, but all right.
We can do it virtually. I'll mediate the entire thing. It'll be behind closed doors.
Sounds good.
I think a peace treaty can be brokered.
Okay.
I think even business can be made so everybody makes money on the entire ordeal, including myself.
That would be cool. All right.
So it's coming. Maybe not this year, but maybe in 2023. I'm going to get everybody together, and everybody's going to make money in the entire deal. And I think everybody's going to do all right. That's all I'm going to say on that point.
Cheers to that.
And
all right. We're an hour in.
What?
We're an hour in. Dude, how long were you going for?
Maybe another 20 minutes.
Can we go another 10?
We could do 10.
All right, 10 more. Let's do it. 10 minutes. Okay.
So obviously we're going to brokerage the peace treaty right there. It's coming. Yeah, it's all going to work out, everybody, and I'm going to have no friends at the end of this comic thing. I'm pretty sure that at some point, when Larry gets a word of this, I'm going to have to convince him, but it's going to happen. I promise. But I do want to back out of all this, and I do want to talk a little bit about Kickstarter. And that, I mean, we spoke about a lot, but obviously in the last year, I'm very curious how you feel about it, and I have a different opinion because obviously I haven't run one. The community in comics has been a very, very, very complicated community. And I find that people are snapping a lot more. People are not being as nice, and that people are going
Yeah,
ballistic. And
that community has serious boundary issues.
I've learned that the nicest way I put it is that some people are unstable.
Yes.
And I don't mean
Well, you clearly have, the people who go on social media, get in front of a camera and start screaming into the void. But then you have other people who sit around like the two people I'm about to have a libel judgment against, like a couple of YouTube drama haters that decided to libel myself and Mr. Lamont. Okay, well, I hope it was worth the few hundred views that this libel judgment is about to snap down against them. So look, those two did a bad thing, and the court's recognizing that, and hooray. But there were other people who sit there and go, well, I mean, it seemed okay to me. I'm like, and I will use this strain of logic. I'm like, that's like saying, okay, maybe the guy was a robber, but he didn't rob me, or a rapist, but he didn't rape me, or a murderer, but he didn't kill me, so he's okay. It's people will sit there and observe other people doing things they clearly should not be
I'll give
doing.
a better example. So I have an
Yeah,
internet troll who
yeah,
is like, "Why should you do this?" Or people on Kickstarter, and they're saying I'm being greedy, and I'm like, I'm producing a product, and I have a theory, and you're calling me greedy for trying to crowdfund my podcast.
right,
Like, what are we doing here? Everybody else has a Kickstarter, and you don't call anybody else greedy. And
right.
so I'm not getting it, in which that I don't think I'm being greedy when asking for money. And if you don't like it, you don't have to give me money. And so
Exactly.
it's like, and then also people are just very quick to criticize and jump on and pull a trigger. And so that's my whole thing, is that I've learned a very valuable thing where I knew the comic community was awkward. I didn't know they were unstable. And I'm curious how you feel about it, because you've been in the game a long
They are. Look, it is like it's a group of people who have some serious boundary issues. They have a hard time affording other people respect, deciding other people maybe have a right to their own privacy, their own lives. Like they will buy into really naive, really ridiculous statements like, yes, I said ridiculous things, but the other person didn't react well, which goes to show you what I was saying was right. Like, no, that's a ridiculous statement. And if you believe it, you're stupid. I don't know what to say. Don't know what to say. It's people are entitled to their private lives. They're entitled, particularly when it comes to comic books, which are commerce. For a lot of us, this is, kind of a part-time activity. And the idea that a bunch of drama hounds want to sit there and be unstable to a bunch of other people who really just need the content so they can feel better about their not so good
I
lives.
mean, I could tell you what's happened to me in my response, and I haven't made this public.
Sure.
I'm planning to do 200 interviews this year. 50 of them are already gone because I've
Okay.
decided to remove 50 potential interviews in the comic world and move them over to the cosplay world where this doesn't happen.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't happen the same way it happens in comics because of several people on the internet. And it was brewing for the last 6 months. And
Hmm.
I mean, that doesn't benefit the community at all. But
No.
that's what happens, is that I moved certain things. I moved 25% of what I'm going to do this year outside of comics. And that is an official statement from me.
Okay.
And that's not good. That means there are 50 less people or 25 less people in the comic realm who are going to be interviewed by me this year at a minimum. And I might move another like 30 to wrestlers and another 20 to voice actors, which means there's only 100 comic people. And it hurts my sponsor a little bit and my sponsor ability. But at the same time, I'm purposely divesting from drama because it's been so bad. And then it was like the first 5 days
Yeah.
of my Kickstarter just put me over the top of
Yeah.
that.
And then that's when these people really love to really screw with you, is when you have a crowd fund going. They, when you're most vulnerable. So anyway, it's reprehensible behavior. It needs to be called out. It needs to be prosecuted in court, and I'm doing my part.
And I appreciate that, because maybe people will wake the fuck up, and maybe
Yeah.
people will become adults again. And it's unfortunate, because I've obviously been a victim of it, and it's been very unpleasant, and it makes me
I
not
mean,
want.
look, you saw, like our mutual companion, Larry Higgins. Last time I was on, your show, he then went on his channel and he started screaming about me. He didn't like what I did with Larry Holder. Okay, fine. But he sits there and screams for like half an hour about my sex life. I mean, what's that have to do with anything? What's that have to do with anything? Why is my sex life his business? I don't get
Yeah,
it.
I don't get it. I don't get it, and I don't think that that behavior, and I'm gonna call bullshit the way it should be, is that personally, I don't bring people's personal lives into this world if it's
Mhm.
unnecessary. And I think it's an issue. And I think, again, you know what is, people really need to learn how to be an adult. There's plenty of things you can criticize me for,
Right.
but you bring in my personal life, and I
Mhm.
don't talk much about my personal life purposely. And I'm a very private individual, and I'm going to remain a private individual, because I got a lot more shit going on, and I just don't. I think there's a lot of unnecessary things, and I wasn't exactly thrilled with that behavior, and I don't think a lot of people were either.
Right.
And call him bullshit, and he's a friend, and I think a line was crossed. I really do, and this is why we're broken a peace treaty. It's going to happen. I'm
All
letting
right. Fair
everyone
enough.
know, but I think that there are much worse offenders out there, and
Sure.
I think that there's a lot more people who are not
Oh,
even doing it intentionally, but are just that far gone. And I say that very nicely, where they don't even know they're doing it, and they are just unstable people, and it's very alarming. And then I've gotten a crash course in the last month, and it changes my entire perspective, because I've been a victim of it, and it's very unfortunate when it changes your perspective, and it makes me want to go back to mainstream comics, and that's not good. That's how bad it was. So, but I digress.
I understand.
And
All right. Well, hey, look, it's nothing. Look,
well, I'm
there's
gonna give
been
you a
so
chance to
much
promote yourself.
stuff going here in January. It's crazy. You don't really, you think like, oh, the new year is just hokey, but this January has been crazy, man. Like, look at John Lamont's success. Look at Palace of the Golden Princess. I couldn't have predicted these things back in December. A few short weeks, and look at this. There's success flowing everywhere. I have a
So
feeling
before you
2022 is
go,
going to
so
be
before you
okay.
go,
Yeah.
where can people find you? Where can people support the Kickstarter?
So yeah,
All
Kickstarter.
that stuff.
Go look for Preston Poulter or Palace of the Golden Princess on Kickstarter. You should be able to find me over there. On eBay, it's Pocket Jacks Comics. Those are the two main way I sell. That I sell my merchandise or comics is through eBay for the old stuff, and then Kickstarter for the new offerings. And as I've been mentioning, I'm going to have a combined offering here for Palace with all the role playing games and the merch and all that stuff in March. And next up's going to be Lords of Iron in February. And I turn these campaigns around very quickly. So there you
And
go.
so obviously everybody just go support the campaign, back it. There's 26 books left on this one. If you miss it, you're gonna have to catch it in March. So obviously go support that. And then as far as I'm concerned, just really quickly, obviously go use Mixum, BCW Supplies, Pop Anime Comics. I got a Kickstarter going on, and check that out if you want guaranteed guest spots. And I believe that is a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.